On my desk, I have a few Zigbee radar sensors or presence sensors. And I got one of these, this one, from AliExpress as part of their affiliate program. And if I remember correctly, I bought this one fairly inexpensively in one of the 199 deals. So I think I paid, actually, let me look at the orders. No, I paid $8.99 for that. Okay. So these are the sub 10 USD type of motion sensors around that price, and both of them are 5.8 gigahertz. So not the the 20 or 24 gigahertz version millimeter wave sensors. So in my assumptions, they were just really good replacements to all PIR sensors, but the 5 these 5 gigahertz sensors, or 5.8 I think, they are not ideal for bigger rooms where you would stay still, or like maybe in a bedroom where you would sleep in bed and you want to detect presence. But I was planning to use this for my ambient light sensor project, and probably in the corridor and in the landing, which means that they are fairly restrictive, small places, and I'm usually I move around in these places, so they don't have to be really precise in detecting presence, as in like fairly motionless presence. So anyway, so I thought there's going to be some just boring products, but boy, I was wrong, because they each have some interesting quirks. So I thought it worth to to show them. And actually, let me just jump into the application, the two applications straight away. By the way, you can see that it is powered from the new Zigbee Smart M6 hub. So I linked both of them to this M6 hub. And so the first one is this sensor. And the thing I like about this one is that when you look at this state, this state changes between some, in some cases it says someone, and if I stay really still, then it would change to something like which says peaceful. So actually it can detect two different states, as in somebody is there moving around, and also in smaller spaces, just like the study where I work in and I'm doing this recording, where somebody is just sitting there and just resting and not really doing much, maybe just like like I'm looking at my phone or something like that. And as you can see, it can detect light intensity, so that's always good, because then you can create additional automations based on light and motion together. And then you have the the target distance as well. So again, I am about to test how good it is in terms of telling, let's say, where you are within the room. But you see that both of them update, and then the history also show, well, that's the history. But if I look at go into the light intensity, well, I just switch this device on, but then it also gives you a graph. Again, I haven't really used it much. So it also can give you a graph of the light intensity of the room. The fact that it also shows distance, that's also good. So that's one of the devices, and I think that was a cheaper one, slightly cheaper one. And the next one, which is this human presence sensor, well, first of all, it has this funky UI, which I quite like. And it pretty much does the same thing. So again, you can see light, and if I go to data logging, and then again, it's going to draw a luminance curve. Again, well, I mean, you can't go back in history now, and I only turn this off, so it doesn't show you too much at the moment, but it does, record the luminance curve. And I think the light sensor is there, because you can see now it goes down. It's fairly quick response, so I do like the fact that it sort of like updates every second or so. And of course, then it also has a distance sensor. And the other thing I like is that it has these, I think it's this function, the radar scanning. And then you can turn this debugging on, which is basically is going to give you this live data, so you can see how it is working. I mean, you can do this in the other one as well, but I do like that there is this special, dedicated debugging functionality. So I'm going to play around with this, how well it detects, distance, and of course you can see how the logic is working. So now it is detecting motion all the time, but if it stops detecting motion, then it starts the counter to 30 seconds. So if it doesn't detect motion for 30 seconds, then the counter goes down, and then at the end of that counter, it will say that, you know, the room is not occupied anymore. Because this device only does, you know, whether only states whether the device, the room is occupied or not. And especially if I go into the okay, these are the scenes, yeah. But if I go into the parameters, there is loads of stuff that you can also, you know, change in terms of, like, you know, all the different settings. So this detection shield and the detection range, so that's the minimum and the maximum detection distance, and then also a trigger distance. So what is the maximum distance? Then it you know, triggers motion, and there is a sensitivity for triggering motion and maintaining motion. So there, again, load of you know, parameters that you can play around with. So maybe if it's if you are happy how it triggers the motion, but you want it to be more sensitive in terms of, you know, keeping the occupied state, then you can, you know, change these settings. Maybe you can move this to up to 100%. It's already at 80. And then you have all these delays that I just mentioned. And yeah, so yeah, again, loads of configuration option. So that's why I do, you know, do like both of these products. And if I look at the listing, just quickly change the view. So not this one, but that was the model. So 5.8 gigahertz radar. So that's the Wi-Fi version, and I've gone for the Zigbee version. So 15 bucks for the that's it. That was the more expensive one. But then you can also, they also sell the 24 gigahertz version. Again, you have a Wi-Fi and a radar version. And of course, that's, you know, twice as expensive, but that's the one that should detect breathing and all sorts of stuff. So I thought I'm just going to be happy with these. And so, I mean, you know, this seller doesn't have really good views, but so far I'm happy with the product. So I don't know, maybe if you see the same product or a very similar looking product from a different seller that you trust a little bit more, then it looks like this Venzi 2 or something. Looks like a very decent product. Yeah, so yeah, there is a lot of settings here. Yeah, you can see all the different stuff here. Yeah, usual features, nothing much. So I dig this debug functionality. I think that's great. I do like it. And then also, oh, look, they even have a screen from Zigbee to MQTT. So, and then you can have these reports. And by the way, it comes with a manual, and I'm going to include the screenshots from this manual because it explains all the different settings, but I just can't find it. So it must be somewhere here. I do remember that it's a really small leaflet with extremely small print. So I had to use, like, you know, magnifying glass to read all the details. But yeah, that's one. And another one, which was, well, I definitely didn't pay this much for that. But that was the other thing. And this only has one version. This is Zigbee version, and it's already stated here. It says millimeter wave. I'm not really sure if you're supposed to say millimeter wave, even if something is 5.4, so it's 5-ish gigahertz, or only when it's the 20 something gigahertz. Oops, notice, because it does state here. But yeah, that's also 5.8 gigahertz. Yeah, so nice products for start. They both have, so this one has a self-adhesive mount, which I already mounted, and then you can just, you know, move this around. So there's a lot of options how you can place it and then which way you can tilt it. So that's quite nice. And the other one is a little bit simpler, and I think this is magnetic, yeah. So again, you have a lot of motion and range here. So yeah, I'm going to just test these now. Okay, so I'm going to freehand this part a little bit because I have the two motion sensors here on the, well, you can see them there. And I'm going to see how they perform, and I'm going to do this one-handed. So let's first test the Venzi. So that's on the right, and that's the distance I'm at. So half a meter, that's about 2 feet, something like that. I think maybe a little bit more. So it shows that the room is occupied. The 50 lux doesn't seem to be a lot. Let me just check this one. Okay, 700. Now that's much better. Okay, so I needed a trigger. So if I go and leave the room, actually we have the logging data here. Not this one, sorry. The radar scanning, the debugging. So now it says 3 meters. That's okay. So what happens if I close the door? Yeah. So this is not a particularly, hardwood door or anything like that. And the funny thing is, it still measures some distance. You see 3.5 meters. And if I back up into the bathroom, 3.9. So there is 4.5, 6 meters. So there is some signals getting through this door, which is very weird. And I'm getting closer and it registers a lesser distance. And if I move to the side, 5. Actually, we might be just getting out of range. So going further back. And now it's not reading me anymore because you can see the countdown is going down. But if I go any closer, oops, it got me. It got me through the closed door. So that's fairly interesting. Actually, let me see if if it changes if I open the door. So the door is now open. The motion sensor is there. So 3.1 meters. I think that's 3.1, 3.7. That's fairly accurate. And I start backing up now. And 4.5, 5 points. Actually, it looks like that it stops measuring me because I'm moving further than 6 meters from the sensor. If I start going back, okay, I'm back. So it might not be good because then obviously, closed doors are not a real obstruction, at least not these closed doors to this sensor, but that's how it works. And if I go back to the other one, sorry, not this one, it's the same. So we are not going to see so much data here. So I think the update is going to be less. And definitely I'm seeing, target distances all over the place. So this is less accurate. So that's the sensor on the left. I mean, it's not that bad, but it's really jumping around. You can see between 180 and 360, pretty much everything. And now 50 meters, which is definitely not 50 meters. And if I start moving away, then, okay, so it says peaceful, meaning that it can detect some motion, but it's more like a presence at the moment. And probably if I move way back, then at some point we may just have to wait for a little. I might just say that there is no motion detected. Okay, I waited about half a minute and it says, the state is none. So that's the state when it says no motion is detected. And I'm moving back. And I think at some point maybe it's going to say peaceful. And then someone. Okay, so here it looks like that the open door doesn't have, okay, now it detected me. I'm still not in direct line of sight with the sensor. And then it says now someone. So that's how it behaves. So yeah, just make sure that you consider this, that closed doors are not necessarily a barrier for these sensors to detect you. And I just realized I haven't tested the closed door scenario with this with the left sensor. So let me just close the door. And again, we might have to wait until this goes away. But I'm trying to just dance around here in front of the door. And you see, it is still, changing the distance. So that sort of means that it is detecting some sort of motion. And it's still, the status still says someone. So I think this one behaves pretty much the same as the other one. As in, the door is not really an obstruction for the sensor. Okay. And I think it was sort of the same place last time as well. Okay, so it's still picking up some motion here, which we are, around like 5.5, maybe about 5 meters from the sensor with the closed door and some walls. And I think that's the point where it is no longer detecting my motion. And after a timeout, it would switch from peaceful back to none. Okay, for this next step, I clip the sensor to this cabinet here, which is looking over my kitchen. So I have a fair bit of distance to test how well it is behaving. So I'm just going to place this camera right below where the sensor is. So you should be able to see what the sensor sees. So at the moment, I'm roughly about a meter away. Oh, by the way, the reason I choose to do this separately, because I wasn't sure if the signals from both of the sensor is going to interfere with each other. So let's give it a test like that. So as you can see, again, the target distance is, it's about 1 meter, maybe a little bit more, but it sort of like jumps around a lot between anything between 56 centimeters to 112. So that would be a little bit difficult to tell what the real distance is. And if I move away now, so sort of here, the distance definitely goes up. So it is tracking, but again, that, moves around quite a lot. But if you can create like buffers, like, below, let's say 3 meters, then, if you, detect movement or distance below 3 meters, then you turn on these lights. And then if your detection goes over, 3 meters, like in this case, then you turn on these lights and probably add some delays. So with this single sensor, I would be able to control these two different lights, independently. So that looks good. But what happens if I just sit and don't do much? Yeah, then it turns to peaceful. But as you can see, as soon as I move my head, then it picks up my movement. But if I'm just looking that straight ahead, then it just goes peaceful. But at least it still says that it looks like there is somebody in the room, as opposed to there is nobody in the room. Okay, so we're waiting for a couple of minutes now, and then it still shows as peaceful. So it can, it looks that it can still reliably detect that somebody is sitting in the room, even though I think this is like a fairly, wouldn't say it's a huge room, but like that distance is about 6 meters, which is sort of like the limit of this sensor. But at least if you're building a logic based on this, you can tell that let's use the latest measurement, distance measurement, to tell where the person is. And if the state turns to peaceful, let's just assume that the subject is at the distance where it recorded distance for the last time. So I think it is still a usable sensor to automate lights. Although I wouldn't be automate lights, like I have some cabinet lights over here. I wouldn't be able to tell if somebody is like 2 meters at this position or 2 meters over here. So for that, of course, it only gives you a distance. It doesn't really give you directions, yeah, you might be able to cover it with a different sensor, which is maybe looking from that, wall this way. I'm not really sure, but yeah, that's what it is. So I swapped the sensors around. So this is now the new Zigbee, if I can remember the name correctly. And I'm just going to reuse the debug mode because we get much quicker feedback this way. But again, so you can see that I'm sort of like dancing around here at the stove. 2.6 meters, that's a little bit too much. 2 meters, yeah, that's good. And then if I start moving around, then you can see that it tracks my movement more precise. It just feels a little bit more granular, to be honest. And I'm back here. Oops. then I think it will go back. It's just 2.6 now. Yeah. So again, yeah, it jumps back to 2 meters. So I think you can definitely create brackets of, you know, distances. For example, if I want to go back to the same situation, well, the same scenario that I said, if I want to control these lights and these lights separately, just based on distance. So if I move all the way back here, okay, so that's more than 6. I think I've said 6 meters previously. It's probably a little bit more. I don't remember the dimensions of this room, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, let's say 7 meters. So this door is definitely the end of the detection distance. Of course, you can see that it doesn't go anywhere above 6 meters. And if I come back here and just sit down, then let's see what happens. So 4.5 meters was the last detection distance. And it is still not counting down. So it still thinks that I'm here. Well, I'm obviously here. But if I try to be completely still, yeah, so you see as the, you know, these sort of like circles restart, that just indicates that it hasn't picked up my presence. And that's what I expected. So again, so now the distance measurement looks pretty much logged into this 4.3 meters, or I think it was jumping up to 4.9. But again, that's a fairly small bracket for this sizable room. So I think that's a, you know, a fairly decent result and sort of resolution. So this sensor definitely has better resolution, and the distance that it measures jumps around much less. So it's really up to your scenario and sort of situation, the size of the room, whether you need this sensor or the other one. So if you need this extra resolution, or maybe I would say just better accuracy in terms of the distance measurement, then I would probably go for this sensor. And for a smaller room or where the distance is not that important, the other cheaper sensor just does pretty much the same job, and to be honest, quite reliably. I was planning to make use of these motion sensors in my ambient light project. So I wanted to move them to Zigbee to MQTT eventually. So I deleted them from the TUI app and I moved it over to, well, I powered them up and I put it into pairing mode again. And as you can see, I have 2 unsupported devices. So they show up as TS0601 and TS0225. And yeah, both of them are unsupported. So that's a little bit unfortunate. So the only thing I can think of is that, well, I have updated my Zigbee to MQTT recently-ish, but maybe there is some new version, or maybe I just have to wait for a couple of weeks or a month and then upgrade then, and these devices will be supported. But unfortunately, they are not at the moment. So I don't know. I mean, like, they don't really offer anything special other than, you know, features that we have seen already, like, you know, reporting occupancy, reporting detection distance, reporting illuminance. So if you remember the Limtech ES01 motion sensor that I reviewed a couple of months ago, I think they have the same, you know, characteristics as I said, you know, motion presence sensing, detection distance, and illuminance. So this does all the same thing. And still this works with Zigbee to MQTT, and these 2 are not. So maybe they are using different cluster IDs or some other identifier for which, you know, Zigbee to MQTT says that this is an unknown device. Maybe you just have a few extra characteristics that they don't recognize, and therefore it is not unsupported. So I guess these are new-ish models, probably. So we have to wait a little bit longer for them to be supported in Zigbee MQTT. But I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. And I'm waiting for this to happen because I would need these sensors. But I think until then, it's going to be a waiting game.